Okay, we have a few minutes for questions. How do we get the lights back on? Can we get the lights?
Artemis, is there a way to bring up the lights from over there?
Huh?
Is there a way to bring the lights back?
Oh, yes, right. I think this.
She has it, I think.
Data, is it data?
All right. Wave your hand wildly if you want to ask a question.
That one right there.
Good.
There we go.
My name is Alta, and I'm the publisher of Shameless Husky Press. We have published Pat Parker, Susan Griffin, and myself. I started Shameless Husky in 1969. The only lesbian love poems I knew about were Sappho. I have since learned there was Roman, I believe, in Spain or Latin America in the 15th century, all wrote lesbian love poems. So one of my questions is, are those the only people writing lesbian love poems before I started Shameless Husky Press? And if so, how did that happen? But if we did, I have rare copies of some of these books. I'll be doing a reading from March Garcia too. But if anyone knows the lesbian love poems other than Sappho and then me, and was looking at Latin America, I would really appreciate hearing about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alta. Anybody? Oh, yes. Do you have a response to Alta?
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
Let me just ask
All right, sure.
quickly. Does anybody have an answer for Alta's question?
Adrian Rich, maybe? No?
Earlier. She wanted to know earlier.
You want to know what time period?
Yeah, that's possible. This was published in 1969, and Andrea was writing before that. That's a good question.
Good.
And that's where it came out. Thank you.
Okay, there was a question here. Yes, you.
I am not very intellectual. I think it's amazing. I lived through all of this and was part of it. And the way that everyone's put it out, put it in phrases, it was great. And I'm so happy that I came here because it seems to me that, all that happened, seeing it here and remembering it, was so great. Seeing that movie last night about the women taking over the building and standing up. And now it appears to me that everything has gotten so bureaucratized. And when I meet lesbians, they don't look like lesbians anymore. They're just so different. All of them.
Look a certain way?
On one end, but Barbara, I mean, they're so like systematized, and they, no insult to anybody that wants to get married. I have a lover. I was one of those, I love women, and I just love women. I wanted to be free and anarchistic and matriarchal, and not part of the patriarchy. And I started the first shelter for battered women in my home in 1970, and it's gotten so. Our shelter has lost 3/4 of its funds because it's so bureaucratized, because we fight for women in custody and we fight for the women. And the director of another agency told me, if you keep going with your heart, you're not going to be a good leader and you won't have your organization. So I don't want to go into all that unless anybody wants to hear it. I could talk for an hour.
We don't have much time.
I know. I was teaching Women's Changing Roles and using Joe Friedman's book, and it was great. And then they changed it to Women in Gender Studies, and they cut the class. I still teach it in another place. But what I want to know, if anyone has any ideas of how we can, I don't say return, but return to what was and build it without allowing it to be co-opted, because the shelters and like the takeovers have become so bureaucratized. And as I see it, so many lesbians are following the patriarchal models. And I guess what I want to know, people have ideas of how we can return to where it started and bring it forward.
In the next 10 minutes. Gail.
In other words, the question marks at the end of my slide.
Thank you for interpreting. I always need interpreting.
Yeah, I'm going to try to collect a few thoughts and be reasonably coherent because this was a lot of stuff. Thank you for a wonderful panel with some fascinating papers. First thing I want to do is talk about one little detail in Megan's talk which raises some interesting issues. And that is the leaflet that was handed out at the Barton Conference, signed by 3 organizations, ostensibly, WAVA, WAP, and New York Radical Feminists. Now what's interesting is that WAVA has said that they never saw the leaflet and were told that it did not attack anyone personally, and they signed it without having read it. And their analytic framework was quite different from that of WAP. So their signature on that leaflet is an interesting one and shouldn't be taken as representing their positions at that time. The second thing is that New York Radical Feminists at that time was practically non-existent. And one of the mysteries is how their name got on the leaflet, which raises the issue of how different people got into these organizations with very different agendas, and the organizations themselves represented different kinds of radical feminism at different times under the same names. One of them being Red Stockings. Red Stockings, when Ellen Willis was in it, is a very different Red Stockings than what we are seeing now. The political content of Red Stockings really changed. Same thing is true of New York Radical Feminists. And now I've been trying to figure out through this conference and through the last couple of months a little more about the sequence of the different groups in New York City and who was in which and when they split. My understanding from talking to Roz Boxendahl yesterday is that New York Radical Women begat Red Stockings and eventually the Feminists, and also eventually New York Radical Feminists, which I think was founded by Ann Snitow and Julie Firestone. And then later they dropped out, and one of the people who was later involved in that was Susan Brown Miller, which is probably how the name of that organization got on that leaflet. But at that point, I don't think there was an organization. So these histories really need to be nailed down in different ways so that just the name doesn't always convey what's going on. Second thing I wanted to say is that I really appreciated 2 things in these talks. One is that there really are a lot of continuities and discontinuities in the trajectories from early, say, radical feminism and lesbian feminism into contemporary debates, such as, Megan, I appreciate in your paper the fact that a lot of the politics of the SM community have direct trajectories back into lesbian feminism, for example, and so do queer politics. And one of the things about the queer analysis is that Artemis and I have been having a debate for about 20 years, so 40, getting back into this. But, queer is generally not essentialist. It's actually more anti-essentialist. And there's a wonderful piece by Anne-Marie Jagosh about the continuities between feminism and queer. They're often, posed as oppositional, but in fact, ideologically, they have a tremendous amount of continuity. Queer theory wouldn't exist without radical feminism. And then the third thing I wanted to address is just this issue of the categories of lesbian, which I thought was really interesting. All categories have limitations, and they do certain kinds of work, and they also do other kinds of work. And you have to look at both sides of what each category does. Now, as someone who was around in those days, the distinction sociologically between political lesbians and some other kind actually mattered as a description of the social world I was in, which is different than the implications of the categories of political lesbianism versus whatever else we want to call it. But the category itself had implications, and one of them is that by defining lesbianism as political, one then starts to have criteria for which kinds of lesbianism are politically adequate. So even the construction of butch femme as not authentic lesbianism in some ways came out of that notion of lesbianism as a kind of sexual feminism with certain kinds of assumptions attached to it. And I think that became its own set of problems. And the last thing I want to address, what? Yeah, okay. Well, I want to have a quick thing, and that is just the narrative about sexology as categorizing lesbianism in certain ways as a reaction against feminism, I think is a myopic perspective. Sexology was categorizing all sexuality other than procreative heterosexuality in certain ways at that time, and the way that lesbianism was treated in that literature was consistent with the way a lot of other things were treated in that literature. So there's another narrative about what's going on in sexology and stuff.
If I can just jump in for the pornography piece, there's a new book by Carolyn Bronstein,
Yeah.
and she really gets into that WAP had this huge mailing list, many of which were women on the New Right who were opposed to pornography, and had a few very wealthy people who were on sort of the masthead who bankrolled it, but that it was in fact sort of, that its claim to sort of mass feminist support was perhaps not quite legit. So she gets just at that, her research gets right to the point you just made there.
One last question, and then I think we have to stop. Yes.
Okay, I have a question for Artemis March. I'm not going to try to comment on it because I'm going to have you comment on it. One of the things you put out there was, I'm not sure I remember the exact wording, but something, there are two things. Relying on our personal experience is one of the most damaging things that's happened in this movement.
No, that's not what I said.
I
Maybe it went too
How did you
fast.
say it?
I said choosing to, when they get tired of Marx and Levi-Strauss and a few of the other guys and hit a dead end, instead of coming back through radical feminism and developing theory from scratch, from our own experience, they went to another bunch of guys who were even more of a misogynist than the other guys, and that's the problem. They went to, these French misogynists for their,
Oh,
it
okay.
became their hose, okay? So that's what I think is so destructive.
Oh, okay. I thought-
Okay, no, I wouldn't,
The
no.
other thing was, it's very interesting to me, the woman-identified woman, which I consider the most important paper ever written about the lesbian movement. And written, I think you said the week before the takeover of the Second Congress, is that right?
We had 6 weeks.
I understand that, but maybe what you're trying to say, it was much more than that, because now you say it wasn't a lesbian thing, it wasn't a woman thing. I mean, because I think you're into social construction of the whole.
What I'm saying is the lesbian taboo is ultimately not about sex. It's apparently is, but the sex part can be easily co-opted, as it is in pornography, as long as it's for the male gaze. But the more fundamental reason, the more hidden reason in terms of why the lesbian taboo developed in this very constructed way in the late 19th and early 20th century was to stop what was happening with women flying the coop. And, especially elite and educated women, they weren't staying down on the farm. It was very effective. I mean, even the damaging of single-sex colleges and so on and so forth. I mean, there's a huge, huge propaganda campaign, and I think
Megan wants to.
I just wanted to, all these comments have been really great, but I think in the back, I didn't catch your name, but sort of you were asking about what can people do about sort of lesbian corporatism or co-op. I think that you might enjoy reading a book by Dean Spade called Normal Life, I believe, which addresses similar questions, but within sort of the trans activist movement, but really speaks to similar concerns that I think you have, and it is a little bit academic, but I do think it's accessible to people who are interested in the issues, and you might just find some really good ideas there. So I just wanted to recommend that to you.
I think we have to stop, but all of us, I think, would be happy to.
We still have 5 minutes if there's any other
Well,
questions.
there's another, I have to get to another session.
Okay. Barbara, did you get your questions addressed? Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
11:10. This is another bill.